After Clermont, the idea of crusade spread across Europe faster than anyone expected.
The Pope had called for warriors, but the message reached far beyond the knightly class.
Peasants, poor townspeople, monks, women, and children also dreamed of the road to Jerusalem.
Many believed the journey was not just a war, but a path to salvation.
For too long have we stood by while the Holy Land is defiled. God wills it. We must march to Jerusalem. Hear the word of the Lord. He commands us to march to Jerusalem. All who join this holy pilgrimage will have their sins forgiven. The time of prophecy is upon us. Heed the call. We must march as one, cleansed by faith.
Hope is the anchor of the soul. Hold fast, for even in this darkness the light of God remains.
They did not wait for princes, knights, or organized armies to prepare the expedition. Instead, thousands began moving east in what became known as the People's Crusade. This first wave was filled with faith, but it lacked money, supplies, discipline, and command.
Families carried bundles, priests carried crosses, and poor men carried farm tools as weapons.
They believed God would provide food, protection, and victory on the road to Jerusalem. But the journey across Europe quickly revealed the danger of holy enthusiasm without order.
As the crowds moved through the Rhineland, violence erupted against Jewish communities.
Some crusading mobs turned their sacred mission into persecution against people living nearby. These attacks became one of the darkest tragedies at the beginning of the crusading movement.
Church leaders sometimes condemned the violence, but they could not always stop the mobs.
The road east was already stained with blood before the Crusaders reached Muslim lands. This was the terrible contradiction of the Crusade: devotion and brutality walking together.
The People's Crusade continued toward Hungary and the Byzantine frontier.
Local rulers watched the passing crowds with fear, suspicion, and growing alarm.
These were not small groups of pilgrims, but thousands of hungry people crossing foreign lands. They needed food, water, shelter, animals, and permission to pass through guarded territories.
When supplies ran low, tension turned into theft, riots, and violent clashes with local populations. Some groups were attacked, others were scattered, and many never reached Constantinople alive. And so Peter, the humble hermit, reached the gates of the great city, his heart burning with the fervor of the Lord's work.
Constantinople must have seemed like a miracle to travelers from poor Western villages.
Its walls were massive, its churches magnificent, and its wealth beyond anything they had imagined. But to the Byzantines, these Western crowds looked dangerous, undisciplined, and impossible to control.
Emperor Alexios I Komnenos had asked for trained soldiers, not a desperate religious migration.
He quickly moved the People's Crusade across the Bosporus into Asia Minor.
There, beyond Byzantine protection, the Crusaders entered lands threatened by Turkish forces.
Many ignored warnings, raided nearby settlements, and divided into rival groups.
Their confidence was high, but their military experience was dangerously limited. In October 1096, Turkish forces attacked them near Civetot.
The result was a disaster. The People's Crusade was nearly dethroned.
Thousands were killed, captured, or scattered in panic across the countryside. The first attempt to reach Jerusalem had ended in chaos, hunger, and slaughter.
But the official crusade was still coming.
Across France, Italy, and the German lands, great nobles prepared for the journey east. These were not poor crowds alone, but armored knights, mounted warriors, and powerful lords.
On this windswept hill, the fate of the crusade rested upon 4 men. Their resolve was as ironclad.
Each leader brought his own followers, ambitions, fears, and hopes for salvation. The First Crusade had no single king commanding it. It was a coalition of princes, nobles, bishops, knights, servants, and camp followers. Their armies traveled separately, taking different routes toward Constantinople. Every road was difficult, and every border required negotiation, discipline, and supplies. The Crusaders crossed mountains, rivers, forests, and hostile territories in the name of Jerusalem. For many knights, the journey itself was already a test of faith. Armor rusted, horses weakened, food spoiled, and sickness spread through the marching columns. Yet the cross sewn onto their clothing reminded them that retreat meant shame before God. As they moved east, they entered the complex world of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines were Christians, but their language, customs, politics, and rituals felt foreign to Westerners.
The Crusaders called themselves defenders of Christendom, yet they often distrusted Eastern Christians.
He had seen countless travelers pass through these lands, each one a potential threat to the stability he fought so hard to maintain. Their fear was not unreasonable, because some Western leaders wanted land, wealth, and power.
This land will be ours by nightfall. Show them the strength of the Norman steel. Show them no mercy.
The Seljuks press from the east, the Normans from the west. Every route across Anatolia is contested.
Understand this. The security of the realm depends on your obedience. I expect nothing less than absolute loyalty. Emperor Alexios surveyed the frontier, the Seljuk threat looming. We must secure this route through Anatolia if the... In the year of our Lord 1095, Godfrey, Duke of Lower Lorraine, prepared to swear his fealty.
Others resisted, fearing they would become servants of the Byzantine emperor.
The meeting between East and West was filled with ceremony, suspicion, and hidden tension.
Constantinople impressed the Crusaders, but it also deepened their envy and mistrust.
They saw golden churches, rich markets, strong walls, and imperial power beyond Western imagination.
The Byzantines saw rough warriors who could defend the empire or destroy its peace.
For a moment, however, both sides needed each other.
The Crusaders needed Byzantine ships, guides, food, and knowledge of Anatolia.
The Pechenegs raid Thrace again. I want them driven back across the Danube by winter. Go, and do not fail me.
Together, they prepared for the first major target, the city of Nicaea.
Nicaea was a powerful city held by the Seljuk Turks in northwestern Asia Minor.
Its walls were strong, its location strategic, and its capture was essential for the road east.
In 1097, the Crusader armies surrounded Nicaea with Byzantine support.
For the Crusaders, this was their first great test against a fortified Muslim city.
Siege warfare was slow, exhausting, and brutal.
Men dug trenches, guarded camps, built engines, and waited under the heat and fear of attack.
The city resisted, while Turkish forces tried to threaten the Crusaders from outside.
But the Byzantines controlled the nearby lake, cutting off Nicaeal's hope of easy survival.
When Nicaea finally surrendered, it surrendered to the Byzantines, not directly to the Crusaders. Alexios raised imperial banners over the city and prevented uncontrolled looting. To the emperor, this was wise strategy. To many crusaders, it felt like betrayal. They had risked their lives, but the richest rewards were denied to them. The tension between Crusaders and Byzantines grew deeper after Nicaea. Still, the road to Jerusalem demanded that the armies continue. After Nicaea, the Crusaders marched into the dangerous interior of Anatolia. This land was harsh, dry, and unfamiliar to Western European soldiers.
Food became scarce, water was difficult to find, and the summer heat punished men and horses.
The army stretched across the landscape, vulnerable to ambush and confusion. Turkish horse archers watched them carefully, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Seljuk style of war was different from the heavy cavalry battles of Western Europe. They attacked swiftly, fired arrows from horseback, retreated, and returned again.
Their goal was to exhaust, surround, and break the Crusaders before close combat. In July 1097, the Crusaders were attacked near Dorylaeum.
The Horteville blood ran hot that day. They would not yield an inch of this ground.
Arrows fell like rain, horses screamed, and the Crusader camp descended into panic. Women, priests, servants, and non-combatants were trapped inside the chaos.
The Crusaders formed a defensive line and held desperately under constant attack.
For hours, they endured the pressure, waiting for the other Crusader armies to arrive. Then reinforcements appeared on the battlefield. Driven by faith and fury, the Knights of the First Crusade began their assault.
The Crusader heavy cavalry charged, using shock and discipline to break the enemy formation.
The Battle of Dorylaeum became a major victory for the Crusaders.
It proved that the armies of the Cross could survive Turkish warfare in open battle.
But victory did not make the journey easier. The march across Anatolia became one of the most punishing stages of the First Crusade. The heat burned them by day, cold struck them by night, and thirst followed every step.
Horses died in great numbers, weakening the knights who depended on mounted warfare.
Some men rode oxen or walked beside their armor, exhausted and desperate. The army suffered from hunger, disease, and the endless strain of distance.
Yet the dream of Jerusalem remained stronger than pain.
For too long we have suffered under the yoke of the invaders. Today, we remind them what it means to be free.
Every hardship was interpreted as a test of the crusading vow.
The Crusaders also encountered Armenian Christian communities in the eastern mountains. These communities could offer local knowledge, supplies, and sometimes military support. The road was not simply Christian against Muslim. It was filled with local alliances and rivalries. The politics of the East were far more complicated than most crusaders had imagined. As they moved deeper into the region, ambition began to reshape the crusade. Some leaders still focused on Jerusalem, but others saw chances to build power in the east.
The Earl led his sworn men away from the safety of the host, towards the shadowed woods where the enemy was rumored to be hiding.
There, through alliance and political opportunity, he established the First Crusader state.
The county of Edessa was born before Jerusalem had even been reached. This revealed a new reality. The crusade was becoming conquest as well as pilgrimage. Faith and ambition were no longer separate forces. They marched together under the same banners.
Meanwhile, the main Crusader army continued south toward one of the greatest cities of Syria.
That city was Antioch.
Antioch had ancient Christian importance, massive walls, and enormous strategic value.
It stood between the Crusaders and the road to Jerusalem. To reach the Holy City, they first had to take Antioch. But Antioch was not like the cities they had faced before.
Its defenses were vast. Its walls stretched across mountains, and its siege would test every soul.
The Crusaders arrived tired, hungry, and far from the lands they had known.
They had crossed Europe, survived Constantinople, captured Nicaea, and won at Dorylaeum.
But the hardest trials were still ahead. At Antioch, hunger would become unbearable.
Disease would spread through the camp. Leaders would argue, soldiers would desert, and hope would nearly collapse.
The road to Jerusalem was becoming darker with every mile. The Crusaders had begun as pilgrims seeking salvation. Now they were becoming an army hardened by siege, death, and conquest. Their faith had carried them across continents, but faith alone could not feed an army.
The world they entered was not waiting to be conquered.
It was defended by cities, rulers, soldiers, and people with their own histories.
The First Crusade was no longer a sermon preached at Clermont. It was now a brutal military campaign across the eastern Mediterranean.
The cross had become a banner of endurance, hope, fear, and violence. And every victory brought the Crusaders closer to both Jerusalem and moral darkness.
At the beginning, Urban's call had promised holy purpose.
On the road, that purpose was tested by hunger, greed, fear, and bloodshed.
Some crusaders remained sincerely devoted to their vow. Others began to see the East as a place of opportunity and power. The journey changed them, just as they changed the lands they crossed. By the time they reached Antioch, they were no longer the same people who had left Europe.
They had seen cities richer than their own, armies unlike their own, and suffering beyond imagination.
They had learned that holy war was not glorious from the inside. It was mud, thirst, fear, waiting, disease, and sudden death. Yet still, they pressed forward. For behind every hardship stood the image of Jerusalem. To them, Jerusalem was not merely a city. It was the place where heaven touched earth.
It was the prize of the crusade and the promise of redemption.
But before they could see its walls, they would face the nightmare of Antioch.
The siege would last for months and push the army to the edge of collapse.
Some would starve, some would flee, and some would claim miracles.
The crusade would survive only by desperation, betrayal, and brutal determination.
This was the road to Jerusalem.
Not a clean march of heroes, but a human storm of faith, violence, ambition, and suffering.
The People's Crusade had shown the danger of passion without discipline.
The Prince's Crusade had shown the power of armed organization. Nicaea had revealed the fragile alliance with Byzantium.
Dorylaeum had revealed the deadly challenge of Turkish warfare.
Anatolia had revealed the true cost of distance, hunger, and climate.
Edessa had revealed that crusading could create new political states. And Antioch would reveal whether the crusade could survive at all.
The armies of the Cross stood before the next great test. Behind them lay Europe, Constantinople, Nicaea, and the burning plains of Anatolia. Ahead of them lay Antioch, Jerusalem, and a legacy that would shape centuries. The First Crusade had not yet reached its goal. But it had already changed the medieval world forever.
What began as a call for holy war had become a march of nations, cultures, and armies.
And as the Crusaders approached Antioch, history moved toward one of its most dramatic sieges.
In the next chapter, the Crusaders will face starvation, betrayal, and a battle for survival.